We're turning our focus now to an entirely different subject, which has to do with tackling the challenge of migration. And to do that, I'm being joined on Sunrise Daily by Professor Joy Ezilo. She's the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Trafficking in Persons, as well as a Professor of Public Law. I want to thank you so much indeed for coming on Sunrise Daily today.
Thank you. And I want to say I used to be, between 2008 and 2014, I was the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Human Trafficking globally.
Oh, okay.
Yes, and then I was also in the UN Trust Fund for Victims of Trafficking, appointed by Secretary General till 2016, representing Africa. Yes.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay, now that we are at a point where over 3,000 of the returnees have come back to Nigeria from Libya, but the major concern now that the IOM, the International Organization of Migration, is saying now is that they have psychiatric problems and they are very likely to return to Libya. How well can we begin in our efforts to tackle that concern?
Yeah. That's why when you talk about trafficking, there are a number of issues that one needs to consider. For me also at the UN, when I was a special rapporteur, and on several of my reports to General Assembly and the Human Rights Council in Geneva, I made it clear that if you're looking at trafficking, you have to look at it from 11 pillars. And the 11 pillars of 5 Ps, protection for victims, prosecution, prevention, punishment, and promotion of international cooperation and partnership. And then there are 3 R's that are central to victim-centered approach, and that is the issue of redress, recovery, and rehabilitation, reintegration. And you find that we pay less attention to this, and that is about the victim, and that's what we call effective remedy for victims of trafficking.
So these criteria, have you found them in the Nigerian situation?
No, and then I have the last 3 C's that talks about capacity, coordination, and cooperation. So if you look at these 11 pillars, they are the fulcrum for any intervention on trafficking. And if you forget the issue of the effective remedy for victims of trafficking, then they're going to be re-victimized and re-trafficked, because you need to understand the psychology. I've seen in my work as the UN Special Rapporteur, I traveled to over 100 countries dealing with this issue, reporting to UN, undertaking UN missions, and I've seen victims, including Nigerians, that already had psychiatric problems. I've seen people who have been trafficked 4 times, and then you keep wondering, why did they let that happen to them again over and over? So, and some of them will say, okay, I think I know better, and they fall into the same trap. In Philippines, I recall quite a number of them. In Nigeria, I saw someone who had already lost a brother, and another brother died. Also, they are trying to cross the sea. So when we talk of it, intervention, for it to be comprehensive and for it to be meaningful, especially and sustainable in the long run, it has to be an integrative approach. That is what is desirable. If we have to fight, combat, and prevent human trafficking and irregular migration in a sustainable manner.
But do you think that the government, do you think that the government in Nigeria today is doing enough, say for instance at the state levels, and looking at what the other sister agencies say, NAPTIP, looking at NEMA, what they are doing? Would you term that as comprehensive enough?
I would say no, because now it is because of the international outcry. I recall trying to get attention of government even over 5 years ago. When I was appointed United Nations Special Rapporteur on this, this is a very high-level position of the UN. I get to a country, every country, and as a Nigerian, I mean, you can imagine how embarrassed I was. There is no one country that I've gone to that they wouldn't tell me about Nigerians that they have a problem, or I haven't seen the Nigerians in irregular migration, and even those who have died, or those in prison, and those who are trafficked, who are victims. And I kept trying to tell the government there is no one issue that gives Nigeria a bad image and bad name, and that also brings to the fore all the root causes and the problem we have in this country about governance, about corruption, than the issue of human trafficking and irregular migration. But they weren't listening. And then in Brussels, I recall getting into Poland and in Frontiers meeting, doing a mission in 2009 in Poland. The first day, they started presenting these terrible pictures of Nigeria, and I'm like, is it because I said, wait a minute, I'm not an ambassador from Nigeria, I'm a UN Special Rapporteur. And they said, no, in fact, they said, we are sorry, but this is what every country in Europe submitted, just revealed that Nigeria is the leading country in terms of trafficking, irregular migration coming from Africa. And then the statistics there to back it up. Therefore, they have chosen Nigeria and Ukraine for special intervention of projects. That's why when you see all this top and we are at airport or Germany or any of the European country, once it's a flight from Nigeria, it has always been there, you see extra vigilance because they already know they're having this problem. And I did a United Nations mission in 2013 in Italy. In Italy, when I went in 2013, September, and for 10 days I was in Italy, I visited about 8 cities. I was in Turin, I was in Rome, I was in Milan, Naples, Caserta, and then Castel Volturno. They had already murdered 7 Nigerian girls in Palermo. And I tried to talk to Nigerian government. Of course, I met the Nigerian embassy because if you go to a mission, it's a high-level UN thing. You have to meet all levels of government in that country, including the Italian anti-mafia, their legislators, and the foreign ministry, everybody. And then I met Nigerians too. I met the person in charge of the embassy, the ambassador, and they said they've been having this problem. And I went to the detention center. I visited 2 migrant detention centers. Actually, the UN had a TV documentary of my mission to Italy. I mean, it's terrible. Once I got there, they were so unruly. I went to the female section. I met females underage, even as 2013, coming in through Lampedusa, crossing the seas, and they all had terrible experiences. They were told what to say, how to lie. And in one Italian city, in Turin, I met 3,000 Nigerian girls were on road, what they call road work, into forced prostitution. And if you look at the statistics, available statistics from IOM, when I went in 2013, it was about 500 Nigerian girls were crossed that year.
So what is the international community?
But this year, last year, it was 11,000.
My apologies. What is the international community doing, or should I say even more personally, the Nigerian government doing to try to break this ring of trafficking?
Yes, of course they have NAPTIP. NAPTIP is a good example of intervention at institutional level, institutional mechanism to deal with this, and they are trying within the means what's available to them. But I think now it calls for urgent action, emergency, and just like you said, better coordination amongst all the agencies that are supposed to be involved here. And of course, already within NAPTIP, they house the police, they have the legal department for prosecution, they also have integration aspect. They don't have enough funding, definitely, and the issue of capacity is another problem. So the frontline officers, who are the frontline officers? The immigration officials who at the airport, they have to be sensitized, the airline staffs, in terms of, there have to be migrant information centers around the country. We have to just raise the level of awareness because prevention is not the prevention efforts is not really going on a scale that is supposed to go on, and especially getting it down to local levels. Because it's interesting when you look at the statistics of not only where they come from, then even within where they come from, you see that there is a concentration in certain communities, and you will find that these people are being recruited by family members, by within the community, and it's not just in Nigeria. I've seen that in other countries that you see Belarus or Ukraine, and it's the same rings. And here, even another interesting thing is that even the victims become traffickers eventually. So you see the way they turn, because they will tell that if you pay up your debt, you will buy your freedom at the end of the day, and then you can become a madam. That's why when they talk about many of the women being traffickers, you can understand, especially women who've been trafficked into the sex industry. So they will become madams, and they too will turn. So when you prosecute and punish, you see some of them who have been victims years back, and then now becoming even the perpetrators.
Is that the only front? Is that the only front where this persists? Because some argue that because of the rather low perception of the kinds of developmental strides, creation of jobs, having that basic amenities been set in Nigeria, perhaps that is also one of the reasons why people try to find their way out of the country. Oh, yeah,
of course, because when you look at the root causes, the push and pull factors, when you come to the push factors, you look at the issue of discrimination, inequality, in terms of access to employment, livelihood challenges. If people can't get decent job, it's a fact of life. You have to find, and you don't have hope, that brings about desperation. So it's a fact of life. You would like to better your life, so you want to migration has always been there. Remember, migration is a marker of globalization. And when we talk about, I always define trafficking in short. I say trafficking is migration gone wrong, because you just people migrate, and migration contributes to the development of any country. But then the irregular and the migrant flows is increasing because of desperation. That's why I said we have to come and look, as you look at the pull factors, like even demand in countries of destination, demand for cheap labor, demand for illicit exploitative services, including both sexual labor and all of that. Then you have to also look at the root causes, and now we're talking about sustainable development goals. The poverty is there, the growing youth unemployment, and more importantly, what we are not looking at in the long run is the fact that we have a growing population, 7 million births every year. How do we sustain that in terms of the social and economic implications of that? So we're not looking at that. And so long as we have that huge number of you, it's not going to be possible for them to find jobs. We're talking of Italy today, and I tell you, where else have been on mission? Even Gabon here, you see huge number of Nigerians. In Morocco, there is even almost a whole city taken over by Nigerians. The same thing going on in Libya is going on there. Now the attention is not there. When I did mission at Libya, the Moroccans, they already have problem with them.
So the government cannot really check this at this point?
Yes, because they are even, in fact, they are lots unto themselves. They operate openly, and they are mafias of their own, and they sell people and resell. It's there. It's going on in Ush. If you go to that area, they will tell you they just kill people. The government occasionally get them prosecute. It is the same. It's just that they still have a government that is stable, that is not as bad as Libya.